Hospital hallways, funeral processions, insurance checks. One by one, tragedy seemed to follow Audrey Marie Hilley wherever she went. Family members grew mysteriously ill. Doctors searched for answers. Loved ones were buried, and every loss appeared to be nothing more than heartbreaking bad luck. But as investigators pulled at one loose thread, an unbelievable story began to unravel. One filled with deception, stolen identities, and a woman who refused to let the truth catch up to her.
Before the syringe, there was a life insurance policy. A mother sits beside her dying daughter's hospital bed, and every few hours she leans in with a needle. She calls it medicine, but it isn't.
It's arsenic.
Yeah. And her husband died the exact same way 4 years earlier, gone super fast before anyone could even ask why.
And no blood test catches her. No
Mm-mm.
doctor calls it in.
None.
What actually stopped her is much stranger than that, and not a lot of people can tell this story right.
Yeah, she's actually referred to as the Black Widow of Alabama.
And she got away with it twice. Vanished for 3 years behind what she called her own twin sister's identity, and died in a way that nobody really could have written better.
Welcome to Unlawful Acts, the podcast where we dive into the darkest corners of true crime, unearthing the hidden and often buried stories of the world's most infamous criminals. I'm your host, Susan Davis.
And I'm your co-host, Jocelyn Frank-Husen.
So let's go back to Anniston, Alabama in 1951. This is really where the story begins, so we can discover the story of the Black Widow. Audrey Marie Frazier was born in the Blue Mountain neighborhood of Anniston. Her parents were mill workers, and so she was raised mostly by her aunt and her grandmother. But the whole time, she really just wanted to be part of the Anniston social elite.
And this is where Frank comes in. Marie meets Frank Hilley when she was only 12 years old. But people would say that she was quite mature for her age. And Frank decided right away, by the time that he graduated high school, so he was quite young, 17, that she was the only girl for him.
And then he joined the Navy and was shipped off to Guam. She and he would write letters constantly.
Mm-hmm.
And then they were married on May 8th of 1951. And she was, I think, only 17 at that time.
So while Frank was out finishing his Navy service overseas, he would actually send his paychecks home to Marie. And he thought that she was depositing them and was saving them while she finished high school, but that is not what happened at all. She didn't save it. She spent it and then some. And she did it all before he was discharged and came home.
Yeah, now he came home to a good job. It was steady work that paid well. Marie worked as a secretary.
Mm-hmm.
And on paper, they both looked like a financially stable couple with the dual income. But in reality, Marie was spending far more than she was making. And for years, Frank had no idea where the extra money was coming from. It was something that wasn't really hidden, because they still were getting collectors' calls and what have you to the house. But he just mostly let it go. He basically had the attitude, whatever makes her happy is fine with me.
And here's where the cracks start to show. So she was actually getting extra money technically from work, but it wasn't from her job. Marie was having affairs with men at her job, and in exchange for preferential treatment, favors, and money. So essentially, she was earning from work, but not from her actual job. But, Frank was saying at that time that the marriage was already ending anyways.
Yeah, he found out about the affairs the hard way
hmm
because he came home sick from work one day. Now, he had been sick off and on for like several months,
hmm
almost several years. And so he came home and he walked into the house and found Marie in bed with one of her bosses. And according to her son, Mike, or their son, Mike, that was when he pretty much decided that he was going to divorce her. But he never got the chance to leave. He got sick instead. And so Marie was right back at his bedside playing the doting wife. And, even Mike, for his part, even though he knew the truth about her affairs, he was kind of hoping it would all kind of smooth out and they'd work it out. But Marie at that point understood immediately that she couldn't talk her way out of it and that she had to step up her plan. Now, Frank spent the better part of 1974 suffering through stomach cramps. He had bouts of vomiting. He had, all kinds of nausea and what have you. And he just pushed through it because the family really couldn't afford for him to stay home from work.
Yeah.
But by May of 1975, it had gotten so bad that he decided to go see a doctor. And the doctor, he did some tests and he decided that it was just a viral stomachache. Now, Frank didn't get better. He got worse. And he got worse rapidly. And it was strange enough. So he was hospitalized in late May. And the doctors did, again, another bunch of tests. And they decided that he had infectious hepatitis.
And Frank Hilley died in the early morning hours of May 25th, 1975, just 2 days after being admitted to the hospital. And his daughter Carol remembers the final moments of her father's life and what he looked at like in the end. She described him as being ashy and gray in color, just overall looking unwell, but that his eyes and the whites of his eyes were actually a shocking blood red, like extremely bloodshot and just overall not right. So, long story short, he goes to the hospital and within 2 days, he's dead.
Yeah, throughout his illness, Maria's right there by his side.
hmm
And she, to everybody around both of them, she looks like the devoted wife. She feeds him his meals, she gives him his medicine. She's the one who gave him his injections of medicine. And really, nobody thought twice about it because it was really only in hindsight that when you think about it, that was the method of the delivery. So Frank's death was sudden enough that the doctors said, geez, I'd really like to do an autopsy. And so she agreed to let them do that. The autopsy, of course, found swelling around his kidneys, his stomach, his lungs were swollen, and he had pneumonia. All of these things are sort of what is indicative of infectious hepatitis. And so nobody ordered a toxicology report because there was really nothing there that indicated that he'd been poisoned in any way.
What almost nobody in Frank's life knew is that Marie had actually quietly taken out a life insurance policy on Frank that was completely separate from the one that his employer provided. So she took a policy on him not long after he got sick. And it was in a total, after he died, she collected a total of $31,140, which by today's standards would have been about $180,000 today. And she blew through that money fast, just as she had been doing for years.
So how exactly did she kill him? It wasn't in one large dose. It was through small doses every day. She'd put small amounts in the food that she cooked for him, in his coffee, or even in the food that she made for his lunch. When she was awaiting trial in jail, she actually told her cellmate, Patricia Lang, that she gave him small doses every day for a long period of time, and she put it into his food.
And that's exactly why it worked as long as it did. So, arsenic poisoning, when it's delivered slowly and deliberately like that, produces symptoms in people that look like a stomach disease or liver failure, which is exactly how doctors were diagnosing it. So, in a sense, they were right, but they weren't right with the cause. So, when investigators later exhumed Frank's body in 1979, forensic testing found arsenic levels that were ranging from 10 to 100 times higher than the normal average.
Wow. Well, Frank was not the only one in that house who got sick. Now, their son, Mike,
Mhm.
he had the same situation when he was in high school. He would get bouts of nausea, stomach cramps. Sometimes he would end up having to stay home from school from vomiting and what have you. But as soon as he went off to college, all of that vanished.
Isn't that
And
something?
yeah, there's no really clear record showing that there was any life insurance on Mike. But investigators, as they started investigating the case, found out that even the neighbor kids, when they would come over to play
Yeah.
and she would give them something to drink, they would end up getting sick. In fact, there was a 911 call
Yes.
at the house, and we're not really sure what the disturbance was, but when she gave officers coffee, they also got sick. So by no means was Frank the only one who was getting poisoned. Marie was doing it apparently to everybody that she came in contact with.
Yeah, nobody was safe. But at the same time, none of this proved anything on its own.
Right.
And it's only until much later when you understand the pattern of what happened to Frank and then later to Carol, her daughter, that it all becomes obvious.
Yeah, for years, really nothing happened.
Mhm.
So they went a few years, and then Marie buys a life insurance policy on Carol. She bought 25,000 on a life insurance policy. She bought an additional accidental death rider of
Mhm.
25,000. So it was a total of $50,000 of total coverage. And about 8 months later, Carol started getting sick. And then in 1979, when Carol was preparing for her high school prom and Marie was helping her, it was so sudden, but she started getting severely ill with nausea. And within a week, she was too sick to even walk. So she had to be hospitalized at that point.
Some people in the Hilly family actually made the connection that the symptoms that Carol was experiencing were eerily similar to the ones that Frank was experiencing that ultimately took her life. And also, just like how she did it with Frank, Marie began to volunteer to give Carol her injections for this so called medicine while she was in the hospital, and nurses and doctor staff let her do it. So, Carol, at this point in time, when she's being hospitalized and her mom is administering these injections, she begins to experience numbness in her hands and feet, which is something that she did not enter the hospital
Mhm.
with. So doctors ran test after test after test on Carol, and they found absolutely nothing. There was no disease to diagnose. There was nothing that explained it. No test came back positive for this, that, or the other. And at this point, Carol's physician actually started to wonder if maybe the symptoms that she was experiencing were more psychological than physical.
Mm.
So at this point in time, they admitted her to Caraway Methodist Hospital in Birmingham for a psychiatric evaluation.
Yeah, when she was in the psychiatric ward, she was being evaluated, so she's got a lot of people around her. But as you said, Marie would secretly give her these injections, and she told Carol not to tell anybody
Mhm.
about her special medicine. Now, Carol was afraid to tell the staff, but not for the reasons you might think. She's so desperate to walk again and have these symptoms go away. Her mother told her that she had gotten the medicine from a friend of theirs named
Mhm.
Doris. Doris is a registered nurse, and she actually said that Doris would lose her job if it came out that she was giving her that medicine. So She was likely so afraid that if she stopped the medicine, she would never walk again. So that's probably why she went along with keeping quiet. But she didn't stay quiet forever. She actually ended up on the phone with a friend of hers from church, Evie Cole. Now, she started talking to Evie, and somehow in that conversation, she just let it out that Mom was helping her. Shush, don't tell anybody. Mom's helping me with these special injections, and I should be out of here soon, type of thing. Well, Eve got very upset by that. And so she called Carol's aunt, Frank's sister, who was suspicious already. And the aunt then calls Mike, her brother, and they tell Mike what's going on with these injections and what Carol had told him. So Mike calls Carol to find out what's going on. And then Carol confirms that, yeah, Mom's giving me these injections.
And now I think this is a really important part of the story where we need to slow down, because this is a part where people often stop getting the facts straight and they misrepresent what actually went down. Because a lot of people, well, it would be really easy to assume that a doctor was able to find the arsenic in her blood and determine that she was in one way or another being poisoned. But that's actually not what happened at all. Nobody picked up the phone. And the real sequence was a lot messier. And honestly, I think it's a little nuts, because it shows you exactly how close this person was to slipping through the cracks and getting away with it.
So about a month into Carol's hospitalization, the doctor comes back and he says, I think she's getting to a point of being malnutritioned, and she might have a heavy metal kind of toxicology going on. He wanted to run some more tests. Well, the minute that Audrey found out about that, well, she decides she's taking her out of the hospital right now. And so the very next day, she takes her home, and the next day she puts her into a different hospital. This time she puts her in to the University of Alabama hospital.
And it wasn't a doctor who called the police or any type of medical staff at all. It was Carol's older brother, Mike, who learned about these injections, immediately understood it as a red flag, and then called it in. So that means that every single one of those shots had been actually administered without hospital staff knowledge, because clearly nobody gave the authorization for this to happen. So Mike contacts, at this point, the Anniston Police Department to report it.
Yeah, and that's where the twist really gets a little weird. So Mike is talking to the police. They're talking about the idea that perhaps the mother is actually poisoning his sister. And they sort of react in a way that he doesn't expect, because they in turn tell him that she's been under investigation for something completely different.
Yes.
They have her under suspicion for check fraud. And so now they're looking into this whole situation. And then in the fall, they actually arrest her for check fraud and nothing to do with the poisonings at all.
And only after that arrest was Carol then moved to yet another hospital and given yet another toxicology test.
Right.
And this is the point where the arsenic is actually discovered in her blood and confirmed. And according to former FBI agent Wayne Manis, the levels of arsenic in her blood were so high that there was no other explanation for that than for them to have been directly administered. I mean, you couldn't possibly get that much arsenic into your system by accident.
Yeah, and then when they were kind of arresting her and looking through her belongings and what have you, they found a vial in her purse, and inside that vial was actually arsenic. And so from there, the case moves real fast in one direction and then painfully slow in another. Frank's sister, who is suspicious all along, she goes to the house and she searches through Audrey Marie's things and she goes into the cellar and she finds a pill bottle. She has it tested and it comes back for arsenic. So now Carol, years later, would describe the real fear. She said being in that psychiatric ward was traumatic on its own, because everything already is so secretive. They're kind of looking at her, they're evaluating everything she does.
Yeah, of course.
And so she felt like that in of itself was very traumatic for her. But she said that by the way that they were acting, it made her feel like the illness was all in her head. They kept telling her that this is all in your head. And she said their mom was the reason. And so she asked her mother directly if she had injected arsenic into her. And the mother, who lied very casually all the time, said, "Gee, I don't know. Maybe. I don't remember."
I don't remember.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't remember. It's just wild. But listen, investigators, they did not stop there. And thank God. They exhumed Frank's body and found that arsenic levels were, again, 10 to 100 times normal. So at this point, they also went to Carol and they tested hair samples. And they discovered something that was even more disturbing than her being poisoned at all. So what was relevant about the tests and the results of these tests is that the concentration of arsenic was actually much higher near her scalp and then significantly dropped off towards the end of the hair follicle. So as it grows down the hair shaft, it declines, which means that forensic scientists were able to determine that Carol had been given increasingly larger doses of arsenic steadily over several months. The arsenic poisoning didn't stop there either. Arsenic was discovered in Marie's own mother and also her mother-in-law. Though these traces were not fatal, they were absolutely significant and found in their system.
So Marie's sitting in jail for check fraud.
Mm-hmm.
She made bond that November, and then she vanishes. She takes her time. She stays in Alabama for a little while. She loses some weight. She colors her hair, changes her makeup, her mode of dress, and then she disappears from Alabama entirely. So, and then in January of 1980, she's already gone at this point. They had exhumed Frank's body, so they actually indict her in absentia, but she's already been gone for several months at this point.
If you haven't hit subscribe yet, this is a fantastic point in our story for you to do so, because this is the point where it stops becoming a straightforward case of mysterious poisoning and actually turns into one of the most strange and confusing disappearance cases that we've ever covered. So now we come to a point where Marie is fleeing. She's on the run. She goes to Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and reinvents herself completely as Lindsay Robbie Hannon, a Texas woman who has fabricated a fortune waiting to be inherited.
Yeah, so she meets a man named John Holman, and she starts dating him. And by October of that same year, by October the next year, they decide that they're going to pack up and move to New Hampshire. So they move off to Marlow, New Hampshire. They marry in 1981. And as far as John Holman and all of the people around him know, this is Robbie Holman. No background, no criminal record that they know about. But then for some reason, and for the life of me, I can't figure out why she would have done this. In the summer of 1982, Robbie, as she's known now, decides that she needs to travel. And she tells John that she's got to go back to Texas, family business, related to the family fortune. And she's got to get some blood tests done because she's been, dealing with this blood disorder. And so while she's away, John gets a phone call from her twin sister, a woman called Terry Martin.
It's just baffling.
Yeah.
So this woman named Terry calls and she is hysterical. She has absolutely devastating news. What do you know? Robbie has died. And she goes so far as to say, Robbie's body has been donated to science and there's nothing left for you to come see. There's no funeral to be had, no memorial service. And John, is totally caught off guard at this point in time. He has no idea what's going on besides to take this woman Terry's word for it. So he does, as this woman is displaying an intense moment of grief. So she's pretty believable. and almost got away with it.
Yeah, she stays on to comfort John.
She's committed to the bit.
Yeah. So she stays in New Hampshire to comfort him and, sort of comfort some of the friends of the family and that type of thing. And then she just stayed. She gets a job as a secretary in a neighboring town. And she looked enough like Robbie in people's mind's eye. Of course, she changed again her look.
Mhm.
I don't know if she cut her hair, but she changes her look and her mannerisms. But they decide that she looks enough like Robbie, so this all makes sense to them. But there was something that sort of didn't quite put it all together. They really did believe that this was her twin sister.
So this is where things start to come unraveled.
Right.
So although Robbie had mentioned her sister Terry before, people that knew John, like his coworkers, friends, relatives, had doubts about this Terry Martin from very early on, as
Right.
that would make sense. So there was something that they were saying, like something about her story just doesn't quite add up. So people that were close to John actually started digging and doing their due diligence to get to the bottom of what was going on with this so-called Terry and also with Robbie's death. So what they did is they started digging into the details from Robbie's obituary and found that the Texas Medical Institute that Terry had claimed that her sister's body was donated to, that was the recipient of, her body so that it could be examined for scientific purposes, actually didn't exist. And this is the discovery that absolutely unraveled everything.
Yeah, and it continues to kind of get weird from here.
Yeah.
The New Hampshire police detective who's looking into this, he sort of pieces together, along with some of John's friends, that Robbie and Terry are the same woman.
Mm-hmm.
The resemblance, the inconsistencies in her story, there were just too many things to explain away. And so, but at that time, the authorities actually suspected that Terry Martin might be somebody else altogether. And so they're looking for a fugitive named Carol Manning, who was actually on the run in the New Hampshire area.
Not to be confused with the Carol that is Marie's daughter, a completely different person.
Right,
A different Carol.
exactly. And so
Yes.
they weren't suspicious because they realize that they're kind of one and the same person. They think she's actually this other person, Carol Manning, because she was the same age. She had matched the same kind of general description as this woman. So they bring her in for questioning in 1983. And so they thought at this point that they'd found that fugitive that was on the run. And so now Marie is brought into the interrogation room. And once she's in custody and being questioned, for the life of me, I can't figure out why she did this. She admitted her true name.
Yep.
So she tells them that her real name is Audrey Marie Hilley and that she's wanted in Alabama for check kiting. Now, unbeknownst to her, she doesn't even know that there's been these murder charges filed against her, and neither do the police. So they have no idea. So we've got 3 years. We've got, 2 fake identities. We've got a dead sister, a fake twin sister. And so all of this unravels in that interrogation room just because of a mistaken identity, them thinking that she is actually this Carol Manning person. So, I mean, what a mess.
It's such a mess.
Gee whiz.
I mean, the story really at this point starts to get so good, you couldn't have written it any better. I mean, this is really just one for the books. So this brings us to January of 1983,
Right.
where Marie is extradited to the state of Alabama. So the trial that followed didn't take long because obviously the odds were stacked against her. It's blaringly obvious. And the jury actually deliberated for less than 3 hours before convicting her on both counts. She's sentenced to life in prison for Frank's murder and then 20 additional years for the attempted murder of her daughter, Carol.
Yeah, so she enters the Julia Tutwiler Women's Prison in 1983. And despite everything, despite the fake identities and everything else, the disappearing, the whole 9 yards, she's classified as a minimum security prisoner. And she's classified as a model prisoner. She's following all the rules, what have you. Now, for some reason, based on her good behavior, she's given a pass to leave the prison for the day. And she gets these passes over and over again. Now, she leaves. She always comes back on time when she's supposed to. But, I mean, with everything that they know about her, it's hard to imagine why they would do that.
And it's hard for me to hold the smirk off of my face right now
Sure.
because this is hands down my favorite part of this story.
Yeah.
Because she did come back. She was released, on her own accord because she was a model prisoner many times. And she would come back until, she didn't, right? I mean, come on. So February 19th of 1987, what do you know? Prison officials grant Marie a 3-day furlough, which is, in my mind, an insanely long time for somebody like that to be released on their own will.
Sure. What
So-
happened to life in prison?
I mean, it's insane.
What is going
That's
on here?
not life in prison. Like, here's a break to go see your husband. And that's exactly what she does, okay? So she goes on furlough for 3 days. She visits John Homan. And this is John Homan, her second husband, the one that remained wildly devoted to her despite all of the crazy things that she put him through over the last few years.
Right.
And he had actually since moved to Anniston so that he could be closer to her and continue to support her. So this guy is with her. He's staying loyal through the whole thing. They spend time together at a boarding house. Romantic. And on the day that she's due back, she actually tells him that she's going to visit her mother's grave. So this is where it gets just so good to me. She obviously never comes back. She flees on foot, and she leaves him a note saying, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I had to do it. Please don't hate me, blah, 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 blah." And she disappears.
Yeah. Now, John, for his part, he reads the note and he alerts the police immediately.
Of course.
I mean, he doesn't want to get it all wound up in this. And so they launch another manhunt. But this wasn't going to last 3 years this time. It barely lasted a week, actually, because she couldn't have picked a worse time to disappear. Because Alabama and Anniston, that at that period of time, was experiencing one of the worst storms they'd had in a long, long time.
Mm-hmm.
It was torrential, freezing rain all day long, all night long. And so she's now running through the forest trying to get away, and she's experiencing this extreme exposure.
Yeah.
So in February 26, 1987, 4 days after she vanishes, she actually ends up on a woman's porch in the rural area of the Blue Mountains where she grew up. And this woman finds her crawling across her porch. She's beat up, she's bruised, she's covered in mud, her face is streaked with mud, her nails are all broken. She had apparently spent the entire time of these 4 days traveling through the mountains and exposed to the storm. So now this woman who finds her calls 911, and the first responders said that she was conscious when they picked her up. Of course, they're trying to, because she's suffering from a lot of the effects of the storm,
Mm-hmm.
she actually suffers a heart attack on the way to the hospital. The doctors are completely unable to revive her at that point. So Audrey Hilley is now pronounced dead 4 days after three hours after she's found and 4 days after she had escaped. And she actually had suffered hypothermia and exposure, and that's what caused her heart attack. She was only 53 years old.
Yeah.
And so her children then decide to bury her next to Frank in that same month of 1987. So there's a lot of red flags in this one for me. This is genuinely one of the most kind of bizarre cases we've looked at with all the different twists and turns. Because again, the person closest to the victims is the one everyone should have feared but didn't.
And that's exactly why the red flags here look a lot different than a lot of the cases that we've covered in the past,
Sure.
whether that be a stalker case or a serial killer or some other predatory type person. I mean, these are very specific. These are caregiver red flags. These are patterns that show up far more than people realize. And I think it's very important for people to understand what they are, whether you are responsible for somebody's care or not.
Yeah, so the first red flag for me was when she was the one who was insisting on administering the care. She was the one in the hospital, 24/7 with both Frank and Carol.
Yes. And with both Frank and Carol, she specifically volunteered to be the only one that would handle these injections. And it's not like she was the mom or a wife that was also a nurse or some other type of
Right.
healthcare provider. She was just insistent that she was the one that was going to handle this because she wanted absolute control over the situation. And I was really surprised to learn that the hospital staff let her do this. I mean, it just seems completely asinine to me that this would even go down. I mean, but here's the thing is people that are clearly not wired like the rest of us, like Marie, they can obviously and oftentimes be extremely convincing.
Yeah, my second red flag was really that the symptoms only seemed to exist
Mhm.
when, or worsen even, when she was taking care of them. And when they got away from her, they went away.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Frank got continuously sicker and sicker under Marie's care until ultimately he succumbed to his symptoms. And Carol, same thing, right? Remember the numbness that she was experiencing in her hands and feet? Those were not things that she was admitted to the hospital experiencing. And when a pattern like that shows up, I mean, this is what we now can identify as a blaring red flag in the medical community. And it's exactly why doctors now have, been trained to consider these types of things. Because back in the 1970s, they weren't necessarily aware that this kind of insidious behavior would be underfoot.
Yeah, I mean, now if, they'll kind of quiz the person who brings them to the hospital a little
Totally.
bit. Yeah. But flag 3 for me was really the financial motive that sort of sat quietly in the background.
Yes, yes. And Marie took out a life insurance policy not only on her husband, but also on her young high school age daughter. I
Right.
mean, a year before Carol's symptoms began, she took out $25,000 policy on her daughter. 25 grand against your kid.
Yeah.
It just is a little sus.
Mind-boggling, right?
Yeah, to say the least.
But this isn't information that the hospital would even have any knowledge of. I
No,
mean, even today, the hospital wouldn't necessarily have that connective tissue to tell them what's going on here.
totally.
So the last flag for me, or the other flag, was really the pattern of absolute compulsive dishonesty. Because even her daughter said that she would lie about things that just didn't even matter. That
Yeah, and I mean, Carol, her daughter, said it herself. She said that her mother lied about absolutely everything.
you know,
And she was incessant about it. She would lie about little things here and there that didn't matter at all. And that's a concern when, let's say, a caregiver is not only lying and not being forthright, but they're also using those lies to leverage complete control over a situation. This is the point where, maybe you think, oh, this person wants to have all hands on deck because they care so much, or they're a control freak. They just have that little quirky something about them where they really want to be the one handling whatever it is at hand. But this is a pattern that's worth taking absolutely seriously because it shouldn't be written off.
yeah, my final flag, which is really kind of the lesson, I guess, to be learned here, is that she wasn't really caught because the system worked. She was really she was really caught by accident.
And that's the part that has really stayed with me through all of this. There was a doctor's vague suspicion about something not being quite right. But then there's Carol's brother, Mike, who is the one that learns that these injections are being, administered to his sister without any knowledge of the hospital staff and is ultimately the one that makes the call to police. And then it's this unrelated check fraud arrest that brings the mom in. I mean, it's all this absolute web of a mess. But truly, like, if any of these things hadn't happened in the exact sequence that they did, maybe Carol's life wouldn't have been saved. Her brother really, in the end, did save her life. I mean, and Marie, like, might not have been caught at all. She might have completely gotten away with all of this. So to me, the lesson isn't trust the system to catch things. It's a little bit deeper than that. It's if something about a loved one doesn't quite add up, don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be
Right.
afraid to speak up and be somebody's advocate and stand on 10 toes and do what you know and your gut is right. Mike didn't have any proof, but he had enough to know that something was wrong, and he made that phone call that saved his sister's life.
Yeah. Audrey Marie Hilley, she built two separate identities, entirely separate identities, to escape what she'd done. And in the end, she wasn't stopped by a jury.
Yeah.
She wasn't stopped by the court or even really stopped by an arrest. She was stopped by 4 freezing days in the rain.
Yeah. Yep.
And so Frank Hilley's death was blamed on hepatitis. Carol's symptoms are written off by a doctor saying it's all in her head. And then Marie herself called the accusations ridiculous right up until they found the vial in her purse.
Yeah, and Marie went so far as to say that she would never poison her own daughter, but the arsenic found in Carol's blood tells a completely different story.
Yeah, like we say, everyone lies, but the evidence doesn't.
If this case affected you the same way that it affected us, leave us a comment below. We would love to hear your thoughts. And if you haven't already, like, comment, and subscribe. So we want to know what you think. Did Mike actually get enough credit for saving his sister's life? We read every single comment and respond. So let us know what you think.
Yeah, observers, thank you for spending time with us today. This case was really very twisted and unusual sort of case for us to dig into. But in the meantime, stay safe, my friends, and join us again next week as we dive into another unlawful act.